Welcome to a medieval village, a place that might seem charming and picturesque from afar. However, behind this idyllic facade lies a harsh reality. Daily life in these villages was fraught with peril and challenges. Let's uncover the grim truths that made survival so difficult during the Middle Ages. Life in a medieval village was simple, but it was also vulnerable to disease. People lived close together, making it easy for illnesses to spread. The Black Death arrived, bringing with it a wave of fear and illness. The plague spread rapidly through the village. As the plague spread, there were no hospitals or effective treatments. Villagers had to rely on rudimentary remedies and prayers. With so many fallen ill, daily life became chaotic. The village struggled to function as more people were affected by the plague. After the plague had passed, the village faced the challenge of rebuilding. Many had lost loved ones, and the survivors had to start over. Welcome to a medieval village. Life here was tough, especially due to poor sanitation and the constant risk of disease. In medieval times, waste and sewage were often thrown into the streets. This created a breeding ground for harmful germs and disease. The dirty streets led to many health problems. Villagers were at high risk of getting sick from the germs in the waste. Some villagers tried to manage the waste by digging trenches or using makeshift toilets, but these solutions were often inadequate. Poor sanitation contributed to the spread of diseases like the Black Death. Villagers were constantly battling the effects of unsanitary conditions. In medieval villages, doctors were rare, and most people had to rely on local apothecaries for help with illnesses. Herbal remedies were commonly used, but they often had little effect. People used plants like willow bark and sage, hoping for relief from their ailments. Without modern medicine, treatments were based on trial and error. Many remedies did not work, leaving people frustrated and suffering. Folk medicine played a significant role. Healers and wise women used traditional knowledge passed down through generations, but their methods were often rudimentary. Despite the challenges, people hoped for better treatments and recovery. The quest for effective medicine continued, but progress was slow. In medieval villages, harvest time was crucial, but bad weather and poor soil could lead to failed crops, causing severe food shortages. When crops failed, granaries often stood empty. This meant that there was no food stored for the harsh winter months. With food in short supply, villagers had to ration what little they had. Meals became very meager and often not enough to sustain everyone. Food shortages also affected livestock. Animals that couldn't be fed properly could suffer from malnutrition, impacting both the villagers and their farms. The aftermath of famine often left villages in despair. Rebuilding after such a crisis was a long and difficult process, with many families suffering loss. Villages often bordered dense forests where dangerous animals roamed. Wolves and bears were common threats. Wolves, in particular, were a significant danger. They could attack livestock and sometimes even people. Bears were also a serious threat. They could break into homes or barns in search of food. To protect themselves, villagers often set traps or built strong enclosures for their animals. Even so, attacks could still happen. When an attack occurred, it left a mark on the village. Damage to property and loss of livestock were common consequences. In peaceful times, medieval villages were simple and close-knit, but they were always at risk of being raided by bandits or caught in conflicts between local lords. Suddenly, danger loomed as raiders approached the village. These bandits were a constant threat, ready to plunder and cause chaos. When raiders attacked, it was a scene of chaos. Buildings were burned, and villagers were forced to flee or defend their homes. After the raid, the village was left in ruins. Rebuilding was a long and painful process, and the trauma of the attack lingered. Even after rebuilding, villages remained vulnerable to further attacks. The constant threat of war meant that peace was often short-lived. In medieval villages, many homes were poorly built. These simple houses, made of timber and mud, often faced constant threats. A roof collapse was a serious danger. Heavy rain or snow could cause poorly built roofs to cave in, endangering the people inside. Fires were a common risk. With wooden structures and open flames for cooking and heating, many homes caught fire easily. After a fire or collapse, villagers had to rebuild quickly. These repairs were often temporary and didn't always fix the underlying problems. Despite the dangers, people had to live in these fragile homes. The constant threat of collapse or fire made everyday life very stressful. In medieval villages, the day started early with hard labor. Farming was the primary way of life, but it was grueling work. Caring for crops required long hours of backbreaking work. Villagers spent their days weeding, planting, and harvesting. The hard labor often led to physical strain and injuries. Blisters, back pain, and accidents were common among farmers. By the end of the day, workers were often completely exhausted. Long hours and hard physical labor left little time for rest. Even after a grueling day, the work was never truly done. Preparing for the next day meant repairing tools and getting ready for another round of hard labor. In medieval times, education was limited and not widely accessible. Most villagers had little to no formal schooling. Without a formal understanding of medicine, villagers relied on herbal remedies and folk knowledge, which were often ineffective. Without proper education, villagers often misunderstood the causes of illnesses, leading to ineffective treatments and increased suffering. Basic hygiene practices were not well understood, contributing to the spread of diseases and further complicating health issues. The lack of proper education meant that many villagers suffered from preventable diseases and didn't know how to protect themselves from common illnesses. Life in a medieval village often began with calm, serene mornings, but the weather could change unexpectedly, bringing severe challenges. Storm clouds could gather quickly, turning a beautiful day into a dangerous one. Villagers had to be prepared for sudden changes. When heavy rains hit, the village could quickly flood. Homes and fields were often submerged, causing great damage. After the floodwaters receded, villagers faced the difficult task of rebuilding their homes and replanting their fields. Recovery from such disasters was slow and challenging. Villagers worked together to rebuild and prepare for the next unexpected storm. Despite the constant dangers and hardships, the people of medieval villages showed incredible resilience and strength. They faced disease, poor living conditions, and unpredictable weather, yet they managed to endure and adapt. Understanding their struggles helps us appreciate the progress we've made and the challenges that continue to shape our world.